They fired him for repairing an elderly woman's car for free. Days later, he discovered who she really was. It was a hot day in the workshop, and the noise of tools filled the air. Luis, a young mechanic with calloused hands and grease-stained clothes, worked without rest. He didn't have much, but he had a huge heart. He took care of his sick mother, and every peso he earned went toward her medicines. That morning, an elderly woman arrived at the shop with an old car that barely started. Her steps were slow, but her gaze was gentle. "Good morning, son," she said in a trembling voice. "My car is making a strange noise, and I honestly have no idea what to do." Luis smiled. "Don't worry, ma'am. Let me take a look. I'm sure it's nothing serious." As he checked the engine, she stayed watching him. There was something in his way of working, in his patience and respect, that reminded her of her own son. Soon they began to talk. She told him she lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of town. Luis, with a knot in his throat, confessed that he also lived with his sick mother and that every day he dreamed of giving her a better life. "You remind me of my mom," he said with a sincere smile. "That's why when I see someone your age, I feel the need to help." The elderly woman's eyes shone. She said nothing, but inside her grew an unexpected affection. That humble young man had more nobility than many rich men she had known. She wanted to test his heart. When the car was ready, she pretended to nervously search for her purse. "Oh, son, how embarrassing. I think I forgot my wallet," she murmured, ashamed. Luis stayed silent for a few seconds, looked at the vehicle, then at the elderly woman. "Don't worry, ma'am. It's fine, you don't owe me anything. Just promise to drive carefully." "But, son, your boss," she whispered. "It's okay," he interrupted her with a sad smile. "There are more important things than money." Behind them, the boss's voice broke the moment like thunder. "What did you say, Luis?" shouted Don Ernesto, a gray-haired man with an explosive temper. "Did you just give away a repair?" Luis tried to explain, but Ernesto interrupted him angrily. "That's why you stay poor, because instead of thinking like a businessman, you act like a sentimental beggar. This workshop is not a charity." The elderly woman watched with tear-filled eyes as the young man who had only wanted to help was humiliated in front of everyone. Luis lowered his head, holding back tears. "I didn't do it out of charity," he said with a broken voice. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." "Doing the right thing doesn't pay the bills," Ernesto replied, pointing at him. "You're fired." The silence was absolute. The other employees stood still, not daring to intervene. The elderly woman covered her mouth in horror. Luis only nodded, took off his gloves, and left them on the table. "Thank you for the opportunity," he whispered as his voice broke. "I guess my mother will have to wait a little longer for her medicines." The elderly woman wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. She could only hug him before he left. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on what you think so far. Don Ernesto turned to the elderly woman, annoyed. "And you, ma'am, next time make sure you come with money. We don't handle pity cases here." She didn't respond. She looked at him with a calmness that hid a firm decision. As she slowly walked away, her mind was already planning how she would change that young man's destiny. That night, Luis arrived home with swollen eyes. His mother waited for him weakly, asking how his day had gone. He just smiled, hiding the pain. Outside, a storm began to fall. What he didn't know was that the elderly woman, who seemed to have nothing, was about to transform his life forever. The next morning, Luis woke up without direction. The shame of being fired followed him like a shadow. He spent the whole day looking for work, but no one needed a mechanic without references. As evening fell, he sat by the window, watching the rain hit the glass. His mother, hearing him sigh, took his hand. "Don't give up, son. Good people always end up finding their reward," she said with a tenderness that dismantled any sadness. Luis smiled weakly, not imagining that at that very moment the elderly woman was pulling the strings of his destiny. Her name was Elena Vargas, a retired businesswoman with a fortune few knew about. She always dressed simply, enjoying the anonymity her humble appearance gave her. That night she couldn't sleep, thinking about the young man who had given up his salary to help her. Days later, Luis received an unexpected call. A kind voice asked him to go to an address for a supposed job interview. He hesitated at first, but decided to go. When he arrived, he was speechless. In front of him stood a modern workshop, newly inaugurated, with his name on the facade, Luis Anco Automotive Workshop. "Excuse me, there must be a mistake," he said confused to the receptionist. Then, from the back, Elena appeared, elegant but with the same warmth in her eyes. "There is no mistake, son. This place is yours." Luis didn't understand. "How can it be mine? I don't even have money to pay for the ride back." "When you helped me without expecting anything, you reminded me of my son," she replied with a trembling voice. "He died years ago, and since then I've been looking for someone with the same heart. I wanted to see if your kindness was real, and it was. That's why I decided to give you what you deserve, an opportunity." Luis was speechless, tears began to fall, and he could only hug her. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just promise me something," she said with a smile. "That you never change because of people who don't understand the value of being good." The news spread through the town like wildfire. Don Ernesto, his former boss, heard the rumors and didn't hesitate to go there, incredulous. When he arrived, he saw the workshop full of customers, the new machinery shining, and Luis confidently leading his team. "I see life has smiled on you," Ernesto said, trying to keep his composure. Luis looked at him calmly. "No, life only gave back what it took from me because of arrogance." The old man swallowed, speechless. Elena approached and, with quiet elegance, added, "I usually invest in people, not numbers." "You lost the best one you had." Ernesto lowered his head and left defeated. From that day on, Luis's workshop became a symbol of hope. He hired young people with no experience, giving them opportunities others denied them. Over time, his business grew, but he never lost his humility. Every afternoon he visited Elena, bringing her flowers or simply accompanying her for coffee. She was no longer alone. She found in Luis the son life had taken from her, and he found in her the mother he had always wanted to see happy. A year later, when Elena fell ill, it was Luis who cared for her with devotion. He didn't allow her to lack anything. In her last breath, she looked at him and said with a weak smile, "I knew you would do something great, son." Luis held her hand, crying. "None of this would have happened without you. Thank you for believing in me." She closed her eyes in peace, leaving behind a lesson Luis would never forget. That true wealth lies in the hearts of those who help without asking for anything in return. Months later, on the main wall of the workshop, he hung a plaque that read, "Dedicated to Elena Vargas, who taught me that being good is never a mistake." Customers would read it and ask who that woman had been. Luis would just smile. "The reason I believe in second chances today." And so that young mechanic who was once humiliated ended up building his success on gratitude and kindness, because in the end, gestures born from the heart always find their way back. You never know who is behind the mask. Appearances can deceive, but respect and dignity should always be unbreakable. Don't forget to comment from which country you're watching us.